The first skill that we're going to tackle are sentence errors, also known as fragments, comma splices, and run-ons. Let's start with fragments. Fragments are posers. In other words, they're incomplete sentences posing as complete ones. In order to have a complete sentence, you need a subject, what the sentence is about, the predicate, what that subject is doing, and a complete thought in order to round out the sentence. Without one of those three elements, you do not have a complete sentence and you have what's known as a fragment. Let's examine some of the common types of fragments. The first common type of fragment is called a dependent fragment, where essentially you have a dependent thought trying to stand on its own, without anything to complete it. Here's an example. Because many people thought that all of the candidates were poor choices. This is kind of tricky because you do have a subject, people, and thought, a predicate, but you don't have a complete thought. Here's another example of a dependent fragment, which he thought would enable him to avoid traffic lights and get him to the office faster. Again, we have a subject and we have a compound predicate, but we don't have a complete thought, so this is called a dependent fragment. The next type of fragment is a gerund or infinitive fragment. Oftentimes, students confuse gerunds or ing words and infinitives, verb with to in front, as an actual predicate. But these two types of words cannot be counted as predicates. Here's an example. Hoping to catch a glimpse of the meteor. Hoping is a gerund. Although it has the root word hope, which is a verb, it is not in fact itself a verb, so that is considered a fragment. To be sure that she can have some privacy. To be is an infinitive. Again, it has a root verb in there, but on its own it's not a verb, so this is considered a fragment. Similarly, in an effort to get to the airport on time. To get is an infinitive. It cannot stand on its own as a predicate. All of these are examples of gerund or infinitive fragments where students might confuse a ing verb or a to be infinitive as a verb itself. The third type of fragment is an adding detail fragment. This is where a fragment simply adds detail but makes it its own sentence. Here's an example. All software in the store is on sale, except video games and cartridges. Except video games and cartridges adds more detail, but it cannot stand on its own as its own sentence. Another example. Several basic courses are required for graduation. Among them, English, composition, an introductory math course, and one general science course. Again, these cannot stand on their own as its own sentence. It's simply a list of courses that are required, not a complete thought. The fourth and final type of common fragment is missing subject fragments. This is simply when you write a sentence but don't include a subject. Here's an example. The professor was interesting and very well informed, but gave demanding assignments and rarely awarded high grades. We have this second statement about the professor, but we did not repeat the subject, therefore we have a missing subject fragment. Although we know who this sentence is about, it doesn't state a subject, therefore it's an incomplete sentence or fragment. So those are the four common types of fragments. Now that we know the four common types, let's look at how to revise fragments. The first way is simply to attach the fragment to the thought that precedes it or follows it in order to make a complete sentence. Here's an example. All software in the store is on sale, period, except video games and cartridges. We decided that second phrase was a fragment because it didn't have a subject, predicate, or complete thought. So in order to fix it, we can simply attach it to the previous sentence. All software in the store is on sale, except video games and cartridges. By joining that detail to the previous sentence with a comma, we've now completed one complete sentence. Here's another example. Because many people thought that all of the candidates were poor choices, we decided this was a dependent fragment because it did not have a complete thought. So in order to make it a complete thought, let's finish it. Because many people thought that all of the candidates were poor choices, comma, few came out to vote. I've added this independent clause to this dependent thought, making it one complete sentence. So that's the first way to fix a fragment. You simply add the fragment to something near it in order to make it a complete thought. The second way to fix a fragment is to make the fragment itself a complete sentence. So you need to rewrite the sentence. Here's an example. The professor was interesting and very well informed, but gave demanding assignments and rarely awarded high grades. We decided this was a missing subject fragment because it did not complete the second sentence with a subject. So in order to do so, we can simply add the subject. However, he gave demanding assignments and rarely awarded high grades. By adding that subject in, we've made it a complete sentence. Here was our gerund fragment, hoping to catch a glimpse of the meteor. I can simply rewrite my gerund so that it's a predicate. I hoped to catch a glimpse of the meteor. It conveys the same thought, but now I have a subject and predicate to complete the sentence. So that's the second way to revise fragments. Rewrite the fragment itself so that it is a complete thought with all the required elements of a complete sentence. Now that we've looked at some common types of fragments and talked about the two ways to revise a fragment, let's take a look at the fragment exercise in your handout. Pause the screencast and attempt the fragment exercise in your worksheet. When you're done, continue playing the screencast to check your answers. Okay, you've completed the fragment exercise. Let's take a look at the answers to make sure you did okay. Feeling like a complete fool is a gerund fragment because feeling is an ing or gerund word. In order to revise this, I could do one of two things. I could turn the gerund into a subject and predicate, or I could attach this sentence to a complete thought, making it a complete sentence. I'm simply going to change the gerund into a verb, so I'm going to say, I feel like a complete fool. You can put and finish the sentence that way. To be absolutely clear was our infinitive fragment. As it is an infinitive, to be, not a complete thought. So I'm going to complete this by saying, to be absolutely clear, comma, and I'm going to finish this sentence by saying, I will not go. So instead of turning the infinitive into a subject and predicate, which you certainly could have, I made the infinitive an introductory element, to be absolutely clear, comma, I will not go, and now I have a complete thought. Number 3, while some students work very hard, is a dependent fragment. I have a dependent thought trying to stand on its own, so in order to complete that, I'm going to add a comma. While some students work very hard, I'm just going to say others do not. That is an independent or complete thought, so by adding my dependent fragment to it, I now have a complete sentence. Not including the trees tagged for sale is my adding detail fragment. So I'm going to attach that detail to a complete thought to make it complete. So I'm going to say, you can select any plant, comma, and then I'm going to go up here to finish, not including the trees tagged for sale. So again, I've taken my detail and I've simply attached it to a complete thought. You can select any plant, comma, not including the trees tagged for sale. Number 5, amazingly never complained a single day of his life is a missing subject fragment. I simply didn't have any kind of subject, so I'm just going to add a little he here, very easy. Amazingly, he never complained a single day in his life. Now that I've added the e back into it, it's a complete thought. And lastly, for example, my red shirt and blue shorts is an adding detail fragment. I've added a detail, but I've let that detail stand on its own, so it's not a complete thought. So I'm going to say, all my clothes are dirty, comma, and then I'm going to go back up here. For example, lowercase, for example, my red shirt and blue shorts. So again, I've simply added my detail to a complete thought to make it a sentence. So those are some common fragment types and a couple ways to fix them. If you feel confident about fragments, let's move on to comma splices and run-ons. We're going to treat those two together because they're pretty similar. A run-on is essentially two independent clauses or complete sentences placed back to back. You can't smush up two complete thoughts in one sentence. You need to have some kind of proper way to join them. So here's an example. Tonight's chapter is long and difficult. You should leave yourself plenty of time. You can see I have one independent clause here. Tonight's chapter is long and difficult. independent clause. You should leave yourself plenty of time is also an independent clause. So I have nothing to join those two independent clauses, making that a run-on. A comma splice is pretty similar. You have two independent clauses, again, are complete sentences, joined only by a comma. So here's my same example. Tonight's chapter is long and difficult, comma, you should leave yourself plenty of time. A comma is not an appropriate punctuation mark to join two independent clauses, so that is called a comma splice. So you can see run-ons and comma splices are pretty similar, and so there are similar ways to fix them. Let's take a look at the 3 ways that you can fix a run-on or a comma splice. The first way is simply to add a period and create 2 sentences. If you have 2 independent clauses, they should be able to stand on their own. So I can say, tonight's chapter is long and difficult, period. You should leave yourself plenty of time. I've simply made my 2 independent clauses into 2 complete sentences, and that works just fine. Sometimes those 2 independent clauses are pretty closely related to one another, and you might want to indicate that close relationship through the punctuation mark known as a comma splice. A semicolon. A semicolon is simply used to join 2 complete thoughts that have a similar meaning or relationship. So tonight's chapter is long and difficult, semicolon, you should leave yourself plenty of time. Notice that I do not capitalize the letter after the semicolon. The third way to fix a comma splice is to use a comma and a conjunction. Tonight's chapter is long and difficult, comma, so is a coordinating conjunction, you should leave yourself plenty of time. So I can simply join the 2 independent clauses by using a comma and a conjunction. So those are the 3 ways to fix a run-on or a comma splice. Take a moment, pause the screencast, and attempt the run-on comma splice exercise on your worksheet. When you're done, continue playing the screencast to check your answers. Alright, let's take a look at how you did. For number 1, dogs come in many breeds and varieties, comma, these days you're just as likely to get a mixed breed. Our error type here is a comma splice because I have a comma joining 2 complete thoughts or independent clauses. So in order to revise that, I'm simply going to turn my comma into a semicolon because I think these 2 are pretty closely related thoughts, and a semicolon would work well to join them. For number 2, the thunderstorm led to severe flooding in the region. The governor declared a state of emergency. I have a run-on because I have 2 independent clauses just smushed together in one sentence. So I'm going to fix that by adding a period here and making this capital. 2 complete sentences now instead of a run-on. Number 3, I decided to stop wearing deodorant in protest of animal testing, comma, my friends and family did not appreciate this decision. Here I have another comma splice because I have simply a comma joining 2 complete thoughts. I'm just going to add a little conjunction here, but I decided to stop wearing my deodorant in protest of animal testing, comma, but my friends and family did not appreciate this decision. I'm using a coordinating conjunction to join my 2 independent clauses. And last but not least, number 4, my birthday falls on leap year this year, comma, that means that I don't actually have a birthday. Let's do a semicolon. Again, I think those are pretty closely related thoughts, so it makes sense to me to use a semicolon to join them. And that is a comma splice. So if you feel pretty confident about run-ons and comma splices, you can move on to the next step of the worksheet. And that final step is to return to your pretest. Use the chart at the end of your worksheet to correct any errors you made on the original pretest. If you have any questions about fragments, run-ons, or comma splices, feel free to call over your teacher for some help.